So again, my name is Emily Morrow. I went to MSU and I graduated in 2015. Originally, when I started at MSU, coming in as a freshman, I thought I wanted to be a veterinarian. So originally I came in and I was pre-vet, and then I switched my major to zoology. For a short stint, I was shadowing a vet near my home. I did it for 2 summers, and then I realized I'm like, I don't think this is what I want to do with my life. There's a lot of things that I feel like I don't have control over in the way that people care for their animals, and I thought it would be something that would really wear on me emotionally. But I had taken a lot of science courses and I'd already been in school for about 2 or 3 years. And I remember thinking to myself, like, oh God, what do I do now with all these science courses that I've taken? I like science, but I don't want to be a vet. I don't want to be a doctor. Um, which at that time someone told me about the BLD program and that Michigan State had this amazing laboratory science program. And if I was interested to look into it, which I did, and I mean, the rest is history. And I guess a little bit, personally about me, I am 31 years old. I am from Lincoln Park, Michigan, so I'm from downriver. Currently, I'm an administrative fellow at Henry Ford, and I have my Bachelor of Science from clinical laboratory science. I'm also recently married. Trying to think of what else about me. I'm an aunt now. So weird, like thinking about where I was in college to like how many years have passed, like not that many, and how many things in life changes. But I'm an aunt now, and I have a black lab, and her name is Pepper, and I love her a lot. And I'll show you a picture of her at the end. Also, if you guys have questions as I go through any part of this, um, either you can put it in the chat, you can take yourself off mute. I don't know if there's like the hand raise function on Zoom. I don't use it very often, but I want this to be fun and interactive. And I can tell you the story of me, but really I want it to benefit you all in some way. And I just want to be here to support you and your journey for whatever you need. So I guess I'll keep moving. So, anyways, once I left Kedzie for the last time and got my internship at Henry Ford, I started my clinical rotations in the summer of, oh, sorry, I'm reading your thing, Paul. We have a BLD pet board. Oh, okay. I will send you pictures of Pepper. All right. So, anyways, when I was an intern, that started in summer of 2015. So it was June to December. During that internship, Henry Ford has a really nice system for it. So you rotate through all the various areas of the clinical laboratory. You spend a few weeks in each area, a couple days in certain smaller departments. Go through hematology, blood bank, chemistry, serology, microbiology. You get to do phlebotomy for a few days, which I was terrified to do. There was the HLA lab. It was a really great, well-rounded experience. We'll get into more of those details of like what those looked like. I have lots of pictures. I did my internship and then I was offered a couple different options for my full-time position leaving my internship, but I chose to take a role in the stat lab, which was hematology and a little bit of chemistry at the time when I first switched. Henry Ford wound up separating those two departments out. So I guess in new terms, I first started off in hematology. I worked in that for 3 years. I worked on an afternoon shift, and I worked every other weekend. And then I moved to a day shift position in chemistry. From there, so I was like in the lab for about 3-ish years. And then I took a role as a point of care coordinator, and I will explain that. So I was in point of care for about another 3 years. And during my time there, I I was thinking to myself, where do I see myself in my future? How do I best make myself more marketable and like continue learning in healthcare? So I went back to school and I got my MBA. I did that all online through Central Michigan University with a concentration in health systems leadership. Once I finished my master's degree, I had applied for a role as a project manager in revenue cycle at Henry Ford Health. Um, we can go into the whys of all of that later. And then once I was in that role, I applied to a program offered through Henry Ford called an administrative fellowship. Um, so that really takes you a lot outside of the clinical space and more into an administrative type role. And when you say administrative, that's very broad. We'll go into that as well. So this program that I'm in now is just for 1 year. It's project based, and then the role after is still a question mark. I'm about halfway through it. I have, I think, a couple opportunities that I've identified, but what does that role look like? I'm still in the process of, I guess, working through that with some leaders that I'm doing projects with now. Does anybody have any questions so far? Okay. Okay. So this first slide is kind of just talking about my time going from being an intern to working as a full-time, I guess I came in as a generalist and then worked in hematology and chemistry. Your 6-month internship, you'll hear this as you go. Are any of you in the clinical laboratory science program? Or is everyone just in, is it BLS?
Yeah, I think it's BLS. Yeah, and
Yeah,
then
a
like
lot of us, yeah, have just applied for like the MLS this round, and we'll know by the end of May if we're like going to be going through the actual like internship.
So, okay. So are you guys, when you say you just applied, do you mean like you applied to the clinical laboratory science program? Did they change the
yeah,
setup of?
it's changed. It changed. Yeah, it changed. So I don't think CLS exists anymore. I think it's just like either BLS or MLS.
Oh, so it's not called CLS anymore. It's just MLS.
MLS, yep.
Interesting how they
Yeah.
changed
They're
that.
always trying to figure out different ways to make it seem more like attractive and more digestible for people looking to get into the field.
Yes. Well, the interesting thing too, guys, is I remember when I was a student, and I think even still today, I think a lot of people are really used to calling this type of role a medical technologist. And I feel like people are still like transitioning to the new name of calling it a medical laboratory scientist.
Yep, that's an issue too.
Yeah. So people like notoriously always call you, oh, you're a med tech, you're a lab person. So changing like that culture and getting people like used to calling it the correct name is it's been a challenge for a long time. Who was it? Sydney? What was the hardest thing for you to transitioning from internship to full time? Mm, I would say for me, at least when I was a student, I'm not sure if you guys brought more analyzers or devices in, but the time when I was going through the program, we had some like really old school like coagulation analyzers that were like the little metallic bead that spins in a circle until a clot forms. Um, the technology is way advanced. So when you go to actually work in a clinical laboratory, it's just like very high tech. And you go from being like this very student, learner, disease state mindset to like becoming like an engineer of sorts, of like running these instruments, like using a critical thinking mindset. I'd say like the mental shift of that was probably the hardest transition for me because I expected to just it for it to be like school 2.0, and it wasn't. So a 6-month internship and finding the right fit. You'll hear this when you guys do your 6-month internship, is that it's basically a 6-month job interview. There's a lot of pressure to, come in, have a good work ethic, like a learner, growth mindset, ask questions, be engaged, help when you can. But really, like, it is also your opportunity to figure out if there's like a certain department that you feel like you really enjoy being in. And that's where the second bullet point kind of comes in here, is the classes that you enjoy now may not always be the departments that you will want to work. I can give you a really great, for instance, I remember being, no offense to Dr. Gerlach at all, but I just remember his like handout format, like paper book that he gave us for like the blood banking classes. And I remember just not taking the lab at the same time and feeling very confused. And I was like, I don't know if I like this. And really not being able to connect those dots at the time I was taking the class. And then when I got to Henry Ford and I did my blood bank rotation, I loved it. I thought it was so fun. You really have like a critical thinking mindset when you're doing blood typing, looking for those abnormal antibodies and antigens on the blood, kind of like doing that puzzle. I'm not sure if you guys have done that in your courses yet, but I did really love that piece of it. And it wasn't until I was physically doing the work during my rotation that I was like, yes, I remember that from the class. And really wasn't until I was able to apply it that I really started to enjoy it. I will say that in my undergrad, I really loved hematology, and I really liked the microscope work and looking at abnormal cells. So I will say that really is what drew me to hematology when I was able to do that in practice. A department that I found out I didn't like as much as I did when I was in school was microbiology. I really loved Dr. Mendoza's classes, and I thought he was a great teacher, and I always was so excited to come to his classes. And then when I did my microbiology rotation, I just didn't love it that much. It was really slow paced, waiting for the cultures to grow. And I don't know, I just didn't love it as much as I thought I would. But anyways, I wanted to point out like a couple things like that I did in the role, and also some things that I learned that I applied from my learnings at MSU. So I would say like the problem solving. So this comes into what you're learning in your courses. So when you're running these samples on these analyzers, when you get a really abnormal result, you can think to yourself, like, what is the patient's disease state? Does this make sense based on the tube type? Maybe I had a nurse draw into the wrong tube. Great, for instance, we had nurses at Henry Ford. This was very rare. We had a couple instances where a nurse would draw it into one tube, have too much and get a short draw on the other one, she'd pour it. So you would see things, and it was like that problem solving mindset of being like, why is this potassium really high on this? Like, I don't know. I guess the way to explain it is like you can start to really identify like what is normal for a human being, and what types of scenarios would have to happen to create certain scenarios. I'd say another thing was a process improvement mindset. I think that comes from a little bit of the culture at MSU of like challenging the status quo, asking questions, like wanting to improve things. And I would say the transition to Henry Ford, they also had a very similar culture in that mindset. Process improvement is like something that's really big across the entire organization. So this was a really great segue, and I think I fit in really well. Because of that, running samples, that was like the day-to-day work. Troubleshooting, this kind of ties in with that problem solving component, interpreting critical results. When I worked in the lab, if you got a critical, let's just pretend hemoglobin, you would call the nurse, you'd report the result, and they would treat the patient. I forget the percentage. I should know this off the top of my head, but it's like a very high percentage of like all of laboratory results result in, decisions that are made in patient care. So the things that you're doing in here, the results that you're getting really do impact what providers are doing on the other side of, the wall here, and how they're treating patients and the medications that they're giving them and how they're treating them. It doesn't feel that way sometimes, especially when you're clocking in, clocking out, and you're just sitting in front of like this guy here. He's going to sit in front of this analyzer for 8 hours, and he's going to run all these chemistry samples and send across all these critical results. But I mean, it's thousands of patients over the span of hours that you're sending results across and really impacting their care. Another piece that people I don't think about when they think of the clinical lab is the regulatory piece. I think at MSU and like in our learnings, we were so focused like on the science and understanding and like pathology, disease state. I'm not sure if that's changed at all, but really when you come into the lab, basically like you have to be following basically like government guidelines of, how often are you checking the analyzer? What is your protocol for training your staff? There's like a lot of things that have to be in place for you to continue running samples and doing testing on patient samples. So that was kind of like where I dipped my foot in and like understanding like quality and compliance and like what rules do we have to have and what rules do we have to abide by to keep this place running and like ensuring patient safety and that we're putting out accurate results. How am I doing on time, by the way, Paul? Do I need to speed this up?
We are, you're at about 20 minutes in.
What time do I have to wrap up by?
I put it for like an hour from
Okay.
6:45 to 7:45. So you're at 7:05 right now.
Okay. I'm going to speed up a little bit. So this next job that I took, I worked in the lab for about 3 years, and I got to a point where I really wanted to start getting outside the lab a little bit. I knew I wanted to like keep developing myself. I wanted to see what other roles were outside of being in the lab. I wanted to work with different departments. For a little bit, I was like, maybe I'll go back to school and look into PA school. I feel like a lot of lab people do that. And then I had to take so many more classes to do PA school, and I was losing them as fast as I could take them. And I was like, this just isn't right. So I took this role as a point of care coordinator. So what point of care is, so this last slide, these samples are sent to this laboratory to get any result that they need for, like, let's pretend hematology, urinalysis, chemistry, whatever test. The patient's drawn into a tube of blood. It's physically sent to this room. What point of care is this is all laboratory testing that's done at patient bedside. So I'm sure many of you have had a point of care test done on you. If you think of a time that you've gone to a clinic and they've done a urine pregnancy test on you and you got your result in a few minutes, that's a point of care test. And if you think about it, that sample didn't get sent to an outside facility. It was probably a nurse or medical assistant that ran that test and interpreted it and gave you the result. So in point of care, because I guess, like, let me tell you, we were a 3-person department, and basically like our job was to train and oversee the competency of these clinicians. So this would be like nurses, medical assistants. We had some people from radiology, from anesthesia that we would train to do laboratory type testing. And we would oversee their competency assessments, like make sure every 6 months to a year that they were still like understanding how to run the test, they could do it appropriately and accurately. I think some easy point of care tests to think of are like the finger poke blood sugar, urine pregnancy, like a rapid strep throat test is point of care, but it can increase in how complex the test can be. So I included this picture down here. So this is a blood gas analyzer. It's in an operating room. We had anesthesia. We had cRNAs that would run the blood gas in the OR on patients. So what we would do was train the staff, do the competency assessments, but if there were any issues with the analyzers, we would also take care of that. We would check the quality control across the instruments. If there was patient test results that were really bizarre and weird, we would investigate them. I will tell you this right now, this was my favorite job that I ever had. It grew me in ways that I don't want to say that the lab couldn't, but I would say that this job was the one that really got me out of my shell and starting to develop myself as a leader. I was able to collaborate with different departments across the hospital. Was the point of care coordinator also? Yes, it was also at Henry Ford Health. And I heard about this job from a former manager. So when I worked in hematology, my supervisor at the time he was the supervisor of hematology. He'd moved on to be the manager of blood bank, but blood bank also oversaw point of care. So he came to me and he's like, hey, you're a huge extrovert. And I have a job that I think would be amazing for you to get you out of the lab, to get you to working with different types of people. You'd be an educator, you'd be a liaison for the lab. It was a super cool job, Brooke. And I feel like not so many people, I mean, like I said, this was a 3-person department at Henry Ford Hospital as opposed to like an 100-person employee lab. We did nursing education. So with these devices on the left hand side here, the point of care, like finger poke glucose, we worked with nursing to make sure if they got a critical result, they were following up with it appropriately. So like it was great to be like able to collaborate with people outside of the lab to have their perspective on their day-to-day and how does their laboratory testing like work into their workflow. How can we make it seamless? I'm not sure if many of you were on the call earlier when Paul was talking about like being a good communicator. He said he's not a scientist, but like learning the science while like having a communications or journalism background. Very similar to what I did in this role of I'm a lab geek. I'm really techie. I'm talking about QC and quality and accreditation and compliance. I'm talking to a bunch of nurses that don't understand this. So how do I take my lab hat off and how can we speak the same language? Like I said, I really loved this job. I think it set me up for like having like a hunger to do more, to be more involved with like interdisciplinary work, and like being more of a bridge. During my time in point of care, because I had that kind of like hunger of like, I want to keep growing, I want to keep learning, I went back to school and got my MBA. Once I finished getting my MBA, this is where like the lab trajectory got like wonky, right? Because if I followed like a perfectly linear path here, I probably would have started in the lab. I would have worked in point of care. If I wanted to come back to the lab, which really would have been my only option, I don't think you can't be like a manager of point of care. You're just a coordinator. So I would have had to come back to the lab. I would have been a lab supervisor and then a lab manager and then a lab director. It really wasn't what I saw for myself. I really had this hunger to like keep learning different areas of healthcare. One area that I was really unfamiliar with that I wanted to learn more about was revenue cycle. I had the VP of pathology at the time, he told me that the ability to follow a dollar was something that a lot of people don't have the ability to do. So I mean, that really was what propelled me to get my MBA, but also like have this interest in like understanding, like following the dollar and revenue cycle in our health system. So I applied for this project management role because that's the sweet spot, right? Like I don't have to know the content to like facilitate meetings and help with projects and create work plans and meet with subject matter experts and billers. I'm not going to bore you with like the projects I worked on, but really it was just how do we work like the most impact, like denials and accounts, um, and really improve life and the workflow for the people doing the work, so the billers, and make it as easy as possible for them to work on the most impact accounts or claims. I don't want to like try to give you guys like all of the background of that because it'll get confusing. But really like I took this role as kind of like a risk. I was like, I don't understand this. I don't want to work in this space forever. I know this is not my passion going into it, but I knew that what I would learn and absorb in this role would be something that would help me in any role I took on afterwards, if that makes sense. So I was in Rev Cycle for a few months, and like I had mentioned, Henry Ford has this administrative fellowship program. I felt a little guilty applying for it after only working in Revenue Cycle for a few months. But it's a very competitive program. So I was like, you know what? I'll try it. If I don't get into it, no big deal. I'll keep being a project manager. But if I do get in, great. I didn't want to limit myself. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to try. I'm going to try to apply to this fellowship. So I applied. It was the most intense interview process of my life. And I got in. So what is an administrative fellowship? So at Henry Ford, it is a one-year program. It's completely self-directed. It's it's a year of doing project work, but in addition to doing project work, we're paired up with senior leadership. So my preceptor is what they're called. My preceptor through the administrative fellowship is the CEO of Health Alliance Plan. His name is Dr. Genord. So I meet with Dr. Genord every other week, and we talk about strategy, what are things going on at HAP, how does the strategy at HAP align with the strategy at Henry Ford Health. It's very interesting learning things and seeing things from an executive level. Also, the learnings that I've gotten from the lab, like I feel like apply to a lot of my thinking in those meetings. What else? Really, like the fellowship is like a sandbox of you figuring out what kind of work you want to work in. So there's things you can do project work in clinical operations. There's in insurance projects, obviously over at HAP, system quality projects, finance, strategy, community health. There's professional development. I have a coach through the program. I have a mentor. We have one-on-one sessions with the hospital or the health system CEO, the chief human resources officer, the chief clinical officer. We're allowed to sit in high-level executive meetings. Just to offer some projects that have been worked on in the past, I'll just pick and choose: strategic planning for a precision medicine program, launching a new cellular therapy program, planning and project management of service lines. And then, so the fellowship experience is completely individualized. Everyone has a different experience based on their interests. And some examples of roles that fellows have left and moved into have been like a group practice director, administrative director, project coordinator, project manager. I think those are probably like the big buckets. Oh, and here's a picture of Pepper. And then that's my contact information. I guess like some of my big takeaways that I'd love to share with you guys is that your career path does not need to be a straight line. You're allowed to figure out what you like and where and to grow in those areas once you've identified them. You don't have to feel like you have to stay in a certain area. You have the option to explore. What I would encourage all of you on the call is to not only do your job and do it well, but go beyond the scope of your work. Once you get the hang of it and in your next career, which most of you, it sounds like you'll be in the lab for your first job, you know, show up, do the work, but go above and beyond when you can, once you get the hang of it. Come in with a good mindset, help your coworkers when they need help if you're slow, if your bench is slow. And just offer to help. Offer process improvement ideas. Things like that will get noticed. And just going in with that hardworking mindset will really pave a great path for you. I think starting in the lab, I guess in general, just lays a great foundation to really get your foot in the door in healthcare. I feel like my cohort, like when I was at MSU, I remember us talking about like, oh, you know, we're going to be in the lab, but what if we decide we don't want to stay in the lab or we're going to be stuck? I just want to say, like, you don't have to be stuck. Not to say that the lab's not a great place. The lab is a great place, and I'm still very connected with a lot of my old friends from the lab.
I think Brooke has a question too about the fellowship.
What
do you see yourself doing after the fellowship? She asks. And I can kind of run the chat too if you don't want to bop back and forth.
Sure. That sounds great. You guys can take your, like, be on camera too if you want.
Yeah, why don't you guys come off camera? Do it. I dare you.
Yeah, triple dog dare you all.
Hey, hi Brooke.
Thank you, Brooke. I'm just like staring at my face. Hopefully Sally's food was good. Oh,
It was very good. Thanks.
You guys.
Sorry about that again.
No, it was really funny. What do I see myself doing after my fellowship? So I'll tell you guys. So I've worked on, I'm like halfway through it. I've worked on a handful of projects now. I really tried to keep it very broad when I came in. I kind of tried to take projects in all different areas. I did some like in the marketing, care experience space, population health. I was working with lawyers at one point, if you can believe that. It was kind of horrifying. What else did I work on? I've worked on like access to healthcare operations. Through the projects that I've worked on, I have found that I like being about one step away from the clinical care. I found that when I'm very removed from it, like when I was working with the lawyers, I was really unmotivated. I wasn't paying attention as much. Obviously, still did a good job, but like I didn't feel like a fire in me towards that work. But there's this project I'm working on right now that I feel like I'm so excited to like go and be involved every day. And it's like a population health project. So out of Henry Ford, there's a new company coming out of it, and it's strictly for population health services. So it is case managers, pop health analytics, utilization management, all in this new company. And basically, with this new company, what they've done is brought case managers from HAP and from Henry Ford and from Jackson Health Network into this one new company. So right now, what they're doing is like trying to lay the groundwork of like, what are each of you doing? How can we find best practices between the three and then strategize and have one unified process going forward? I think I really like process-based projects and work and like process improvement. And I feel like that is like a direct result from the lab, which is so weird to think about because now I'm like more involved with direct patient care, but I still like that like process improvement, like incremental, let's make this better. And that comes from working in the lab.
Does anybody else have any questions? I have a few I can ask too, if no one has any.
Oh, I love that question, Brooke. Best work-life balance. I think my last two jobs gave me a really great work-life balance. When I worked in point of care, I was on site 5 days a week, except when COVID hit. Then we had one person in the office and then two of us would be at home. I would say that job was salaried. So it was like, as long as you got the work done, if you needed to leave early, you could. So I would say it was flexible while still being in person. The project management job with revenue cycle was fully remote. So basically, like as long as you put your 40 hours in and you made any meetings that you had scheduled, you could do what you wanted, really. Like I had some friends that would like take naps in the middle of the day, or they'd go out and get groceries, they would do laundry. Sometimes I miss that level of flexibility, but then at the same time, this is something I've discovered about myself. I cannot be fully remote. Like I have to see people. So it was a good learning experience. I'm glad I worked a job like that. What was your job? Okay. So Audrey asked, what was your job as an undergrad? Actually, when I was in undergrad, I worked as a secretary on the first floor of Kedzie, which is like the education department. I think it's like for the teachers.
Yeah, it's the science education for teachers, but then like non-science majors too.
Yes. So I worked as a secretary. I helped set up the labs for the teachers. I also like helped grade their papers, which is so funny to look back on now. But it was a great job. It was like this secretary job, and if I ever needed to take a day off work to go home to study, my boss was very understanding. She never forced me to work if I had to study. It was really flexible.
I'll ask a follow-up to that. How do you think that kind of helped you progress through your career? Like how is that valuable to you beyond just your undergrad, but kind of pushing you through your internship into where you are now?
Like as my job on the first floor.
Yeah. Yeah. What kind of skills, what kind of valuable skills do you think you obtained from having a job like that?
I would say it was good to have a job in undergrad just in general to like understand working dynamics of, how do you interact with your boss? How do you interact with your coworker? How do you show up and be professional? How do you build relationships? How do you ask for things like a day off? How do you do conflict resolution? Not to say me and Gabe fought or anything like that, but we were definitely different people. So like understanding and working with different types of people, you're going to get that experience wherever you guys go. I'm sure of that. But I think having some type of working experience in undergrad is beneficial. in addition to that job that I had at MSU, I also worked at, it used to be known as ACO Hardware, Ace Hardware. I worked as a cashier. That was also a great job looking back. Dealing with the public, I mean, that's a skill set on its own. Like most of the people that came up to my register were like really old, nice people, but you know, randomly get the person that was really angry. But like knowing how to navigate that and like bring that person down and be empathetic to their situation if they were, you know, ticked off because they bought something and it didn't work. Like, how do you still be nice and have them come back to your store? I think you can get a valuable lesson from any job that you work. It's really just about mindset. And you guys should be thinking about things like that too. So if you have any jobs that you have now and you might be thinking like, oh my gosh, I'm just a freaking cashier at this stupid place. Like, how am I even going to put this on my resume? It's so dumb. Like, I think back to that job at Ace and I'm like, I learned such amazing like interpersonal skills by having a job like that that laid the foundation to like where I'm at now. How do you communicate with people? How do I interact with people?
I know we
I
have quite the variety of different jobs here, but sorry, Bija, go ahead.
Oh, yeah, so I'm kind of interested in doing some administration later down the line, definitely. I don't know if you already mentioned it, but like what kind of made you realize like uh you'd rather do like other than like direct patient contact with like and being in like directly in the medical like versus wanting to like oversee everything and kind of how you knew, oh, I want to be up here kind of thing.
Yes, I would say, Bija, that I think I started to have that thought when I worked in that point of care job. So when we would collaborate with different departments, we were allowed to sit in and be like the subject matter expert for the lab for like the system-wide glycemic control subcommittee. If there was anything that had to do with like a point of care blood sugar, we had to be the content experts on that. Like during the nursing big system-wide nursing leadership meetings, if there was something like educational that they had to do for laboratory testing, we had to give, you know, talk to them about that. And it was in those meetings, I remember like my heart racing, being in front of like rooms of like 200 nursing leaders, and I'm like, they're gonna tear me to shreds. I just remember feeling like this is a big impact. Like I'm getting involved like at a higher level of things, like more collaboration, higher level decision making, influencing change. And I remember being like, this is so cool. Like, I want more of this. Like, I want to influence change on a bigger scale. And you can do that when you move into more administrative roles.
Okay, thank you so much.
You're so welcome.
Thanks for asking on camera too, Mija. Much
Oh yeah.
appreciated.
No, this makes it so much more fun to like, you feel like you're like in a room with someone having a conversation with them. I appreciate you guys coming off camera, really.
Not that the questions are bad in the chat, they're great in the chat too. So if you don't feel like it, it's okay.
How are you guys feeling? Like, let me ask you guys questions. Like, what is your favorite class right now?
I don't I don't know. I like our MMG lab because no one told us that they were just gonna throw us in there and then we would have to start doing stuff. So it was
Yeah.
like it's very Victor. I don't know if it was the same for you, but like I remember when we did like our 213 and 314 labs, like we had very specific instructions and they were like, okay, do this and follow this, and then we all get thrown into this MMG lab together and everybody's like freaking out and like, oh my, they're like, did we do it right? Like, are we getting graded on this? Like it was great. It's funny. It's a fun experience. So, and it actually, it's helping us learn, like just do it and ask questions.
Is that with Dr. Mendoza? Who's your professor?
Yeah. Yeah.
He's fun. He's
Yeah.
fun.
He's a funny guy.
These guys here. He always says these guys.
I just remember it was kind of fun because I felt like he would have people like get up and explain what was going on, like what was your finding, and you'd get to speak in front of the class. And I remember every time I did it, my face would be like neon red, and I'd just like get the sweat down my back. But actually, like I look back now and I'm like, I appreciate that he would pick on us from time to time and have us speak in front of everyone. Looks like some of you like molecular diagnostics. I do not remember that class at all. Who teaches that?
Dr. Morris is teaching it right now.
That makes sense. I think when I went through it, it was Dr. Gerlach. And it was just like the slide handouts. And I was like, I don't know what's going on at all.
It's also like the beginning of the semester, so I think it's just we're like 4 lectures in, so I'm like, the content's pretty okay right now. We'll see how it goes.
Well, molecular diagnostics has changed so much from when I took that class too. I mean, that is like the future, right? Like that's where like AI is really moving in. Yeah, it's changed a lot from the time that I was a student. So I can see why you guys would be into that. Do you guys like work with AI at all? Do you guys ever talk about that in your classes? I feel like we talk about it a lot at Henry Ford now.
Just telling us like not to cheat using ChatGPT. Like the biggest thing that it's in all the syllabi now, like at the bottom, like we're very aware you can use ChatGPT. Don't do it, you know?
I honestly feel like it'd be very hard to use ChatGPT like as an MLS student. Like, and I feel like it wouldn't help you. You don't even write papers, do you guys? No. So do you have does anyone have like a favorite professor that you guys like, or like anyone that's given you really great words of wisdom? Have you ever like cried in someone's office yet?
I don't know. Have you, Emily? Did you cry in any offices when you were an undergrad?
I almost did. I went to Dr. Doig's office. She's retired now, right? I would assume.
Yep, Dr. is retired. Yep.
I went into her office and I'll be vulnerable with you guys here. So I remember I was very close to starting my internship. And I remember, oh, gosh, I don't remember which professor it was, but they were like, please do not go online and don't look up like reviews of like MLS, like the profession. They're like, it's going to confuse you. Don't look at it. And it encouraged me. I was like, I'm going to go home and Google. I'm going to look up like employee satisfaction in this job title. And like, of course, I just see like all these forums of people feeling like undervalued and underpaid. And they're like, I would never tell someone to go into this program. This is terrible. And I remember just being so scared and going into Dr. Doig's office and being like, what if I've made a horrible decision? Now I'm in this program and I got to do this 6-month internship and I'm guaranteed this job. And what if I chose wrong? What if I hate being in the lab? And I remember like freaking out in her office. And she just like looked at me and she goes, so what if you hate it? Like, so what? And I was like, I'm going to be stuck. Like I chose this path for myself. I'm going to be stuck and I'm going to be miserable forever if I'm miserable. And I remember her telling me like, you never have to feel like you're stuck somewhere. There's always a solution. If you don't like being in the lab, Emily, go back to school for something else. And I remember like, I still think about that all the time that she told me that. And I feel like that's why I've had such a weird growth trajectory of being like, I want to get out of the lab. I want to explore something else. I want to do these different things. Like I think of Dr. Doig and her saying, you never have to be stuck. Continue to explore, learn more. You'll always just keep learning. And I feel like I've had that mindset. And you know what? Like even in this administrative fellowship, I had to take a pay cut to move into this role. Like I haven't had like a financial like linear path either. Like I moved up to this project management position and then I took this fellowship and I dropped back down to like where I started. But like the learnings I'm going to get through this experience and like the role that'll come after, like will be absolutely worth it. So don't be afraid to take those risks, take the lateral moves, because it's all going to add up to something more. I feel like I got really preachy there.
It's all good. We don't mind preaching. I have a kind of a question. You kind of hinted to it a little bit about, gaining education and stuff like that and furthering your knowledge in the field and whatnot. How did you feel the balance was for you doing a master's while also working full time? Like, how was that management and how did you navigate that?
I'd say like if I could give you like a 1 to 10 score of like how stressed out I was because of school, I'd say like overall, if I gave you an average, it'd probably like a 6 or a 7. Like there were times it was like 10 out of 10, I want to cry because I was getting married at the same time. I was buying a house at the same time. So like I was having to deal with like in-laws and where they wanted to sit at what table while taking like a managerial accounting class, you know? So, and you guys will probably face this too, because I feel like for some reason there's something really twisted in all of our minds of like when you're starting to settle down and all of a sudden being like, I want to go back to school again at this really crazy hectic point in my life. It's like, I don't know. That's when we all just like want to endure all this stress, I guess, in our late 20s. But I would say like, so the program through Central Michigan University was one course at a time. It's expedited, I guess. So it was 8 weeks for one class, continuous for 2 years. So as a 2-year program, I was able to take my courses online. I was able to read the material, watch the lectures on my own time after work or during lunch breaks or something like that. So it was self-paced. Yeah, I mean, I felt like it was good for someone that was working full time. They made it really accessible, especially it being online, and it was because of COVID. I mean, everybody had to switch to virtual, so it was a really good time to get my master's, I think. Can I tell you guys a story about Dr. Hoig?
Of course.
This is
I
one
know
that's
Sydney will appreciate that.
I
I
wonder
love Dr. Hood. I love her.
I wonder if she'll remember this. She might. At the very end, you'll have to draw each other's blood. Have you guys had to do that yet? Or no? Brooke, did you say something? You're on mute.
Sorry, my background's really loud right now. I think they took that away actually. Like Miss Markstrom was saying, like they don't do it anymore because people got so queasy that like yeah, they don't do it anymore.
Yeah, we had someone pass out in our class. That's actually really funny. So yes, so my best friend was a very slender, very small girl. And but she was tough, man. She did like jujitsu, she did karate. So like I was like, if I'm gonna stab her with a needle, she can take it. And I remember we agreed we would draw each other's blood. And because she was really tiny, very slender, she had like no veins. So, anyways, it comes the day that we have to draw each other's blood. And I was unbelievably nervous. I'm like a very touchy-feely person, but there's something so incredibly gross and invasive of sticking a needle into someone's arm. Because I felt like I was hurting her. So, anyways, I tie the tourniquet on her arm. I find the vein. I get the needle in, and I have who was it? It was Dr. Morris and I think Dr. McQuiston, like flanking us. And I go to draw, her name was Sam, still is Sam, she's still alive. I go to draw my best friend Sam's arm and I stick the needle in and nothing's coming out into the tube. So like I know I've completely missed the vein. I'm like fishing around in there. Horrible. And then I can't remember if I like blacked out. It was like Dr. McQuiston's like, okay, take out the needle. You got to take out the needle because like nothing was coming out and the tourniquet's still on my friend's arm. So I pull the needle out and of course it's like blood coming out. And I have my gloves on, and it's like, this is like something out of a cartoon, you guys. I like try to like stick my thumb on it like it was like a faucet that was leaking. And Dr. McQuiston and Dr. Morris were like, no, 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 don't touch it. And I just like took my hand off and I like immediately started sobbing. I had like a real horror story when it came to phlebotomy. And I remember like everyone was like, it's okay, Emily. Sam's fine. Like my friend Sam's like, Emily, like she was laughing. She's like, it's fine, Emily, do not worry. It did not hurt. And I was like crying. So I was like, that's so embarrassing. Like I would never want to react that way, whatever. And it was Dr. Hoig that I remember she had these like insanely like huge pipe veins. And I remember she goes, you're going to draw me right now. Because otherwise, if you don't do it right now, you'll never do it again. Because you'll be too scared. And I was like, are you sure? Are you sure you want me to draw you? And she's like, oh yeah, get ready right now. You're going to do it. And I drew her blood. And I remember hugging her after because I was like, you are right. If I left this room and I would have been too afraid to do it again. So I don't know. That really, I mean, I guess I had to do a phlebotomy rotation at Henry Ford, so I did have to draw again. But I think maybe I would have had a harder time doing it if she hadn't pushed me in the way that she did. Did you guys, so you guys, since you don't draw each other, you don't get to know your blood type then, do you? Oh, that was such a cool part. We got to like type and screen ourselves.
I think you should motion them to let us try it again because I'm sure we would want to.
I don't know about the story I just told. As long as you guys promise it won't affect you.
I think we gotta make Dr. Morris and Dr. McQuiston, Dr. Hoig all watch that you tell that story again. So then maybe they'll want to do it.
Oh my gosh. I just remember like the horror of like the blood squirting out. And you know, it's like after so many years, it gets like more and more like crazy in your head. It probably wasn't that bad, but yeah, no, I appreciate Dr. Hoig tremendously for her doing that as soon as like I finished. Oh my gosh.
Is there any more questions? I have a couple more to kind of wrap it up, but if anyone has any more questions, please feel free to type it in the chat or hop on camera. If not, I'll ask my follow-up questions.
Can I ask them one question first, Paul?
Yeah, absolutely.
So you guys are thinking about doing this 6-month internship. Are any of you thinking about coming to Henry Ford or interested in coming to Henry Ford for your internship?
So I am, let me just put my camera on. So I am in MLS right now, and I just submitted my like whatever I wanted to go to. So I find out next Friday, and I did put it as my second option just because it's a little bit far from my house, but I'm willing to do the drive because Henry Ford was really cool. But I don't know, I might get there. We'll see.
I'm excited for you. I thought it was an amazing experience, and I think the lab leadership at Henry Ford Health is just amazing. I mean, they were so incredibly supportive when I said, I don't know if I want to stay in the lab forever. They were like, okay, we'll help you get to where you want to go. Like, what kind of leader does that, you know?
Yeah, so I'm excited and nervous, probably more nervous because I don't really know what to expect when I go, but I'm ready.
You're gonna love it. It's a little bit of a culture shock, like when you first like leave a classroom and work full time, even doing the internship, but they have a really great program in my opinion. Really, really great. So I hope you get it.
Yeah.
Whichever ones of you are interested in apply, I hope you all get it. Because I can't say enough nice things about the team over at Henry Ford. All right, Paul, you can ask your question now.
So to kind of wheel it back into BLD a little bit, looking back, what did you value most about your time at BLD?
Looking back, I guess two things. I'd say I valued the time with my friends. I feel like the MLS CLS program is like so intense, and I hate to say it this way, but I do feel like trauma bonded to like some of the people that like went through the program with me, and like the sleepless nights. Like my lab partner from like the hematology labs, his name's Joey Majorana. We are still best friends. He was a groomsman in my wedding. I took photos of him when he proposed to his girlfriend. Like those friendships that you make now, not all of them, but some of them, you're going to stay close with some of your friends that you make through the program, and it's going to be amazing to see where you all go and where you end up. My friend Sam, the one that I made bleed, she's a lawyer now. She also left the lab. She worked in Chicago for a while. She, even back when she was in BLD, she knew she wanted to be a lawyer. So she finally followed her dream, and now she's a lawyer out in New Jersey. We're still good friends. I was a bridesmaid in her wedding. And I would say like from like a foundational like skill set level, the science and knowledge that you learn through BLD, like sometimes you feel like you're like, what the heck? They're like preparing us to be freaking doctors. Like how much you're learning about like disease, and because when people are coming to the hospital, they're sick. So you're being able to identify all the different types of sicknesses. I in the fellowship, I just went on a clinical rotation with a doctor in internal medicine, and they were talking about metabolic alkalosis. And I was able to understand what they were talking about because of my time in BLD. And I was like, wow, I still remember this stuff after all these years. And he was talking to the residents about, what do you guys know about it? What do you understand? I'm like, don't be a snob, Emily. Don't speak up for these like residents, medical residents. So the things that you do learn, you're going to be able to apply and you'll remember them. In your personal lives too, when you're sick, you'll become your own family's doctor. I promise you that. My mom still calls me every time. She's like, she'll send me screenshots of her My Chart lab results. And she goes, what do you think about this?
All right. And then one final one.
Mhm.
Is there anything you would do differently looking back?
Oh, I know what it would be. I'm trying to think of the way to phrase it though. I would say, don't be afraid to put yourself out there. I used to be like, I got to just keep my head down. I'll do a good job. But I don't want to do anything extra. I don't want to take on anything more. I don't want to learn more. I just want to clock in and clock out. It wasn't until I had really great leaders in the lab that said like, hey, Emily, let's do this process improvement workshop. Let's get you involved in these things. Did I start to like really start craving that more? I would say like having that confidence, like to want to do more earlier on and not feeling like, oh no, there's someone way more experienced than me that should be in things like that. Like don't sell yourself short, get involved. Get involved early, even if you feel like maybe you don't belong a little bit, you do. That's probably the big thing. I feel like once that set in, like probably for me, it was a little bit later, like 3 years into my career, I started to do that a little bit more. It really took my career and went once I started doing a little bit more, getting more involved.